I'm sitting there last night watching this documentary about the Roman Empire. Actually, in the last week or so, I've been kind of watching a few of these documentaries about the Roman Empire. I don't know why, it's a bit of a phase with me right now. But in last night's documentary, they got to a section where they were talking about the military and the recruitment and how they trained these men to become legionnaires, centurions, and soldiers of this kind of nature, like the professional armies of the Roman Empire, and kind of the process involved in training these troops and the process involved in selecting these troops. And I thought it was really interesting that, they preferred to, select people from the country, from the farmlands, because they were kind of tougher, stronger people. They were saying how very few, apparently, soldiers, really good soldiers, came from the inner city or the city, because they were believed to be a lot softer, and they were not as good as coping with the weather and the conditions out in the field. One of the things they tested these men on was marching ability. They would send these men to march for like 10 to 20 kilometers with heavy gear, shield, sword, and the rest of it. And one of the requirements was for these men to be really hardy and endurable, able to take long marches. So I'm sitting there, for some reason, my mind, every opportunity it gets, I kind of link back to my little puzzle that I have to solve myself. And it kind of hit me in the head, okay, marching seems to be a really prevalent thing, even in today's military. There seems to be every sort of ceremony, every kind of show of strength of any army, there seems to be some sort of routine where, tight formations, synchronized marching. I've seen a march where they lift their knees really high up. I've seen marches where they kind of have straight legs and they kick straight legs out in front. And I was wondering in that moment, why is that the case? Why are they marching like this? And then it occurred to me, I'm like, oh, maybe there's some sort of training element to this. Maybe these men are kind of training to do this. It's not just some fancy way of walking. It's a very inefficient way of walking, really. In this documentary, they were talking about how in rain, in snow, these men would have to move, right? And I remember stories about people that have kind of been in my life, who've been in the army or served in the army, or my relatives who have kind of been in the war back overseas, and they would talk about these boots and how walking in the mud, these boots would just collect everything, right? All this mud, you would have basically a 5-kilo boot, you have to kind of carry around, if it's like really thick mud and whatever. And so then it clicked in my head and I was like, okay, I've got this problem with these hip flexors that are kind of causing me trouble in the bottom of the deficit pool. I was kind of trying to address the glutes, and then it kind of hit me in the head. I was like, so as girls, man, just do some marching. So I kind of took that on as a march. And I thought, yesterday I kind of tried to address the glutes. This morning I woke up and I was still kind of iffy in the hip flexors. If I was to palpate, they were kind of a little bit weird, tight, sore. And I thought, let's pump some blood into them. And after 5 sets of 50 of these that you're seeing, 25 each leg, with 3-kilo ankle weights that I have lying around in the house, I was able to get a lot of blood through the hip flexors. Not only the hip flexors, but my glute med started firing up as well, because you're spending a lot of time on one leg, right? Anyway, so it was interesting to me to see these men doing this march, and I'm thinking, like, why are they doing this? Like, the Romans did it back in the day, but they probably didn't do it in such sort of like high knees or high feet or something like this. They were just going for distance. Something as simple as walking can be a freaking exercise and a half when you have 30, 40, 50 kilo pack on your back, armor, sword, shield. They were talking about how important it was for the Roman army to be really good at marching all day, to get into position in the field in an advantageous position so they can set up defenses, their formations, and we all can kind of seen, movies or documentaries or images of really tight, organized formations of legionnaires. So it kind of occurred to me, I don't do any running, I don't do any hiking, I don't do anything like this. And everything that I've been doing in the last few weeks has been very much glutes and hamstring heavy. Everything's about posterior chain. Even my squat, again, lots of glutes, lots of glutes, lots of glutes. And for me to sit there and be like, you're undercooking your glutes and I'm doing so many things for my glutes, you kind of thought to myself, okay, I could be wrong about this, but let's address the other side of the thing. And as soon as I hit it with these high knee marches, I'm calling them marching in my book, but basically it's a single leg knee lifts In the past, I've just done one leg for whatever, 50 reps, 30 reps, whatever the case might have been. Now I'm interchanging them. So it's kind of a bit of a break before you get to the same leg again. It was a really funky feeling. Like I said, hip flexors really kind of lit up, glute med lit up, and it made the deficit pulls good. It made them good. There was no pain. I could really put my mind into it. There was no pinching sensation on the bottom of that pulled kind of deficit pull. And I'm thinking about all of this, and I'm like, maybe it's the hip flexors. These things are not very simple to think about. The body is a freaking puzzle, man. It's a puzzle, and then there's a puzzle on top of that puzzle, which is about how to get it stronger. These compensation mechanisms that kind of take effect in the body. Okay, you have tight hip flexors. Is that a weakness? Or is that I've said tight muscle is a weak muscle, and it's kind of served me well in the past. But then you look at sprinters, 100-meter sprinters. They all have anterior pelvic tilt. And I'll be damned if they have weak hip flexors. The whole damn sport is about hip flexors. If you think about what sprinting is, it's really quick hip flexion and then really quick hip extension. So flexion extension is basically a hip sport, right? There's no way they have weak hip flexors, but they're in anterior pelvic tilt. One of you other fellas said in the comments that you kind of tried addressing the anterior pelvic tilt for a very long time. You've kind of given it up and you've kind of taken it as normal and you're going to run with it. I thought that was an interesting take, and it's not the first time I've heard this take. However, if you start getting lower back pain, if you start getting kind of these negative symptoms, then you have to do something to address it. If you're walking around in anterior pelvic tilt and it's okay for you and you feel good, then it must be not too severe. But I've seen some severe anterior pelvic tilts in my time. Obviously, sprinters spend a lot of time in hip flexion positions. I don't know. I don't know where, I would need to do a bit more reading to understand whether removing that sprinter out of anterior pelvic tilt and restoring that pelvis, whether that produces better performance or not. I'm not sure, but there seems to be a bit of a pattern that I'm seeing with these explosive athletes, whether it be basketball, soccer, sprinting, like athletics, any sort of athletic sport. There seems to be this pattern of anterior pelvic tilt. I don't know, that's because a lot of these athletes have very strong quads. They're jumping, they're sprinting, and it's very quad heavy. But then again, when you think about the final stage of sprinting, the top speed, maintenance and acceleration of the top speed, like when you're fully standing up in a sprint, that's a lot of hamstring there. It's a lot of hamstring. So I don't know. It's very hard to kind of think about this. All you can do really is kind of beat around the bush until you hit the nail on the head. And today, it felt like I hit the nail on the head. Yesterday, I kind of felt all right, but I didn't do any deficit pulls yesterday. I kind of felt gingerly, you know what I mean? Like I try to do these hip thrusts, I got frustrated with them. I couldn't really put my mind into it, might into it because of the discomfort of the bar. And a few of you guys have made some good suggestions, putting cardboard, on top of the foam thing that I had and just layering, up all this stuff, which is a very good idea. Makes me want to just really test it out right now, see how it feels. But really, doing something with the hip flexors felt good today. And this is not the first time I felt good today. Now, this doesn't mean I'm going to drop all the posterior chain work and I'm going to run with the hip flexion exercises. This is a balancing act, man. It's a balancing act. There's nothing else to it. Now, once again, I've made this hypothesis that I need to address my posterior chain. It's weak. I have to address it. And so I've been hammering the hell out of it. And really hammering the hell out of it, doing 200 kilo RDLs and then doing deficit pulls and doing all sorts of things like this. So maybe now the hip flexors are getting smoked. The only other time that I've had hip flexor discomfort like this was, I mentioned this in one of the few last videos, when I was doing block pulls, and they were quite high. They were still kind of below the knee, but they were quite high. So basically it was pure vertical shin angle at the start of that pull. And so what it is really is just pure hip extension. There was no quad involvement at all. And I remember I did this for a week or two, and I started getting real discomfort, even during the reps of doing these block pulls, like real discomfort in the hip flexors, like they are just tight as all hell, like they were gonna rip. I didn't know what to think about that at that time. Now it's happened again in a different type of setup where I've got forward leaning shins, so not vertical shins, in a deficit pull. So it seems to me every time I go hard at the glutes, it seems that the hip flexors get freaked out a little bit. And this is in conjunction with lots of freaking squatting as well. So it's interesting. It's really interesting. The other thing that I found interesting today was the hip flexors. After I warmed them up and I went to the deficit pull, I started feeling my lower back pump up heaps. And that kind of reminded me of the pin squats, pumping up heaps. So this back discomfort, it's very, like I said, it's very, very difficult to work out exactly the structure that's kind of lit up or that's sending you these signals, because there's lots of referred pain. There's a lot of all these sensory, these nerves around the body which kind of crisscross, and it's very hard to kind of work out which structure is talking to you. But when I was experiencing those lower back pumps, with the pin squats, I'm thinking to myself right now, maybe the hip flexors were talking to me. Because if you remember, the hip flexors, especially the psoas, the iliopsoas, originates from T12 to L5 and then inserts into your proximal femur. So if you have a psoas that's pissed off, it's going to exhibit into a lower back discomfort. And you think to yourself, oh, it's my erectors, I got to do my leg extensions, my back extensions. So it's tricky stuff, man. It's really, really tricky stuff. I'm not saying to you have to sit down with your freaking pen and paper and work out and plan out this whole elaborate plan of the human body. I think the best thing to do is just play. Just play like a kid, man. Play like a kid until you work out which toy goes into which hole and vice versa and whatever. You just trial and error. Yesterday I did something. Today I did something. In my book I've written today, very, very positive note. Very, very great feeling doing the marching, in the sport. But I think I just wrote marching, 3 kilo marching ankle weights. Obviously 3 kilos is a lot of weight. And I remember, I don't know if you guys remember seeing me, work with leg lifts, so standing knee lifts with a kettlebell attached in some sort of weird way that I showed you guys, some sort of strap that I bought in a hardware store. I would step on top of a kettlebell, and I would just basically tie my foot to it, and I would lift the kettlebell with a bent knee, so kind of like hip flexion exercise. So I've done that in the past. So I've been talking to the hip flexors for a little bit, but I've never had, one other time I've had it, but I haven't had it in a long time where I've had this like hip flexor, like, hey man, I'm pissed off, really pissed off hip flexors, which kind of starts to make me think maybe the hip flexors are the structure which are needed for me to go to develop really good strength off the floor in the deadlift. Because when I increase that range of motion, my hip flexors are talking to me. Maybe the hip flexors weakness is making me turn away from the quads, because engaging the quads means engaging the hip flexors. Not sure. There's a lot of things to kind of consider here. But it's really cool. Like when you're testing these things out for yourself and you're trying all these different things and you get to something, it's like, yes, I'm onto something, man. And my family, my friends, man, like I've said this to them, like after like a session like this, I would walk in the house, I would go to my wife, man, I'm onto something. Man, like listen to me, man. The next month, I'm squatting 300. I'm telling you, man, I found something. She's been listening to this for like 7 years, and she'll giggle at me all the time, like, here we go again. It's become a standard joke now in the household. And, oh, you onto something? I'm like, yeah, man, it's working out really well, And then down the track, something else will pop up, and I'm like, oh, damn it. I thought this was it, man. I thought this is something that's going to really benefit me. Well, this is kind of the workout that I had today. Really, really positive feeling. Much, much, much better feeling than I had yesterday. I was able to put my mind into the bar, like I said. The interesting thing was when I went to the squats, it was like, well, no problem here. The squats are feeling excellent. So, in my history, you have, man. Sometimes you shake my head myself, man. So I know for a fact that when squats are going poorly, I have TFL type pain. When the deadlifts are going poorly, I have lower back / hip flexor pain. So it's all about juggling all these things. I'm glad the pin squats are back, man. Pin squats, man, that's special, man. This morning I woke up and I was feeling my quads, strain sensation. I'm really tired. There's a bit of a fog kind of about me ever since yesterday. And I didn't really push it that hard. As you guys have seen me, I've done way more than 240 kilos in the pins, man. Like I've worked up to like 340, albeit a much higher pin. But I'm going to stay away from those super, super heavy weights because, I mean, if you do that, there's not much energy left like for anything else. And also, that period where I was doing crazy freaking pin squats, that was a period where I was on annual leave. So ample rest and all that sort of stuff. Now, if you take a 340 for a ride, it doesn't really matter if it's one rep, man. The central nervous system involvement in contracting your freaking structures around your spine so you don't blow the damn spinal cord out of your back. In order for you to kind of stabilize, man, like everything. I've said this in the past, man. You can do crunches, ab wheel rollouts. You can do whatever exercise you want. Dragonflies, human flags. Nothing can replace sheer weight. I can't explain to you the contractions involved in my stomach, like in my abdomen, when I've got 340 on my back. Like it is such severe contractions that it kind of, I think to myself, these are cramps. They're not freaking contractions, they're cramps. And same with like the obliques. Man, everything locks up, my lats. I've actually pulled, I don't know if you guys remember this, but I pulled a muscle in my upper trap from doing from doing these pin squats. Pulled an upper back muscle, just the way my elbow kind of wasn't the same sort of angle leaning backwards. That was enough for it to kind of get strained. Obviously, if we could do 20 sets of those, that would be fantastic, but the human body's not made to max out like that every single day. And I'm always thinking about the spinal loading, decompression, all that sort of stuff. So it's not the greatest thing for the spinal cord. But pin squats, man, I've been thinking about pin squats such a long time. A few of you guys have actually said, finally, you've given into your thinking of pin squats. Finally, I know, man. It's just, you take one idea, you run with it, you run with these deadlifts, you run with all these kind of variations of posterior chain stuff, and then you finally get to some sort of consistency where you want to do it every other day, and then you find a little gap, and then you take that for a run. So now the plan is deficit pulls one day. I've got him at 160, which is a fair bit away from my max, but it just goes to show you I can do a 300 and I wish I could. I can do a 200 kilo 5x5 RDL, but these deficits are challenging me in a different way, man. They're much harder for me, and we've talked about, if you find deficits harder than RDLs, it means you're that kind of lifter, blah, 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 blah. RDLs are easy for me. I have short arms. I have these freaking T-Rex arms. So for me to bend over like that and try and keep a flat back in such a bent over position, it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult for me. But if you want to be a good deadlifter with the body that I have, you're going to have to get really strong in kind of bending over and hip flexing and really having strong psoas muscles, because without those, your back's going to give out. Guys, I have more support on Patreon, and I just want to give them a quick shout out. It freaking means the world to me. So since last night, I'm not going to see one name because of this app that I have, but I have Chad Glazier. Thank you, man. Azarina Degani. I have Bernie, and then I can't see the name underneath Bernie because there's a bar here, the voiceover bar. So I'm sorry I can't say your name. That's upsetting. And then after that, I've got the Lifting Gamer and Matthew Reitman. All of those names and the name, it's annoying me now. I can't say the name behind the bar. This voiceover bar is kind of like a volume bar that goes up and down as I'm talking. I don't know why it's even there. There's no freaking function on it, but I can't say their name underneath Bernie. I'm sure all of you guys can see on the screen. The response has been insane. I've been thanking you guys every black screen. I'm so happy that I've decided to do this and actually, shout out all you guys that are supporting me. It means the world to me, man. Like, I can't believe it. I think we're up to 80 overall Patreons. It's just astonishing. It's astonishing that you guys feel the way you do, and and find value in these videos. Like I said in the last video, man, this is just me talking about something that I freaking love to do. And you guys are the same, by the sounds of it. You guys have the same thoughts as me. You have the same type of puzzle to solve. And it's a really cool kind of community that we built here. Anyway, guys, I'll catch you guys in the next one. I'm sure I'm going to talk to some of you guys on Patreon and also on Instagram and, of course, YouTube. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.